Hello, welcome to Issues and Ideas. I'm Chris DeBello. Wish I had better news to start the show off with, but unless something miraculous happens regarding the federal government shutdown, the end of this month will be the temporary end of the SNAP program. This will affect 41.7 million people who get SNAP benefits, the food assistance program, of course. That equals 12.3% of the American population. And of that 41.7 million, 39% of that number, those are kids. And 11% of those are kids under the age of 5. And this isn't adding to the food that they have on the table. This is to get food on the table. That's how heavily relied upon the SNAP program is. At last check, more than half of the states have made this delay of benefits official, New Jersey being one of them, New York, North Dakota, Nevada. I saw a pop-up notice on the New Jersey's Department of Human Services site. It noted this, I'm reading here, it is unclear if SNAP benefits loaded on your family's first EBT card prior to October 31st, 2025 will be able to be used after November 1st, 2025. So even if you have funds on your card, the card still might just not work. So this is now going to put even more pressure on local food pantries and food banks who are already facing record high demand for just the bare essentials. Never mind thinking about Thanksgiving or Christmas. So if things are working out for you, things are going pretty good, you have money in the bank, you have food in the fridge and the freezer, when you go shopping this weekend, get a couple of items for your local food pantry, just to make sure, because think of things this way. Imagine if you couldn't put food on the table for your family, for your kids, but okay, I can go to the food pantry, I can get what I need, the bare essentials, and I can feed my kids this week. That's the other part, too. They're thinking week to week. Next month, holidays, just let's get through the week with enough food to keep everyone healthy. But imagine going to the food bank thinking like that, and you find next to nothing there. So when you go out shopping this weekend, pick up a few items, look for food drives. I know a lot of stores, they have, if you can round up whatever you're spending with your card. You're already at the register, the self-checkout, whatever the case may be, and you can round up a couple of dollars, and that would go to your local food bank. Because a lot of these fundraisers, they're done local, and the money stays local. So any way that you can help support your local food pantries, food banks, to in turn help your neighbor, you're in the store, you're shopping anyway, just get some good stuff to make sure the shelves are filled when people in true need go to the food pantry and hope that their answer is waiting for them there. For decades, the victims of rape by priests and others connected with the Catholic Church fought for what I think most see as just what was right, justice for them and penalties for their abusers. The Catholic Church thought they had time via the statute of limitations on their side. Now, while the battle was long and hard, that sought-after justice is coming to victims with more and more frequency. As an example of this involves Del Barton School in Morristown here in New Jersey. Thanks in great part to New Jersey state laws, the truth was unearthed, and justice, well, let's just say to a degree, resulted, a greater degree than even recent past. My first guest today is here to review what this case involved, how the ruling came about, and what this case means for other victims of sex crimes committed by priests. He is the director of the New Jersey offices of survivors of those abused by a priest. He's also one of those survivors, Mark Crawford. Mark, thanks for being on the show again. Always good to talk with you when there's good news after so long of talking about we hope that there's going to be good news.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me again.
SnapNetwork.org. If you're listening on the stream, you'll find your state location through that website. And in New Jersey, it's /N_new_Jersey. And we have that link at our homepage as well. So catch up the listener on this, because in light of everything going on in our world, this might have been one that slipped people's attention, because it's really two parts to this trial regarding the victim named TM, who, although their name isn't released, they've been very vocal about their thoughts about this case. Take us through the first part and what brought it about, and the story behind what took place in Delbarton back in the mid-'70s that TM was subjected to.
Sure. So at that time, Delbarton, this elite prep school, grades 7 through 12, was a boarding school, and the all-male boarding school. So the boys who stayed on campus often worked odd jobs with the monks, an order of Benedictine monks, which operates the school. And in this case, TM worked with the maintenance crew, and there was one monk, Father Richard Lott, who was a chemistry teacher and head of maintenance on the sprawling estate of Delbarton in Morristown. So over a holiday weekend, New Year's weekend in 1975-76, the monk took TM out to a party, gave him alcohol. He was a bit inebriated, certainly feeling woozy at least. Early morning hours of the next day, in 1976, he was brought back to the monk's residence. Now, this particular monk didn't live in the abbey like all the other monks. He was allowed to live in a barn away from the abbey. And apparently, according to students, liquor and marijuana was often available for the students who worked with this monk. And it was during the early morning hours that TM was sexually assaulted by this Father Richard Lott. So the school all along denied that TM was abused. And even after the verdict, the headmaster of the school refused to admit that TM was abused, and they tried to say TM was fabricating this for money. The fact is the jury didn't buy it, and they awarded TM $5 million. Now, during that trial, there was much evidence provided that showed that numerous monks had abused students over decades, from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And in 2018, the school issued a statement to the community, to the students and the families, that 13 monks and one lay teacher had been accused of abusing boys at the school, and some of the other parishes in Newark Archdiocese where they served. And there were more than 30 victims, or at least 30 victims at that point, that they acknowledged. And that's quite stifling for any one institution to have so many credible abusers. Additionally, during the trial, it was a fact that at least 2 of those credibly accused were still living on campus at the Abbey, which is part of the campus. But there were a number of others that were still on restrictions, apparently living at the Abbey. So while the monks maintain that they've done their part to clean up their act, they say they're accredited by an organization called Presidium. But what they don't often say is that their own monk at the time, Father Elias Richard Lorenzo, was actually on the advisory board of Presidium for years.
Oh, God.
And when he left, he's been recently elevated to become the auxiliary bishop of Newark. Now, another teacher at Delbarton has assumed a position on the Presidium board, to my knowledge. His name is Mr. Durso. So they are still have members sitting on the board. So I find it hard for them. They call this an independent organization accrediting the school with their policies and procedures regarding sexual abuse allegations.
That is
so, quite disturbing. And, again, they wouldn't acknowledge, even after the jury found that TM was abused and that the school was largely responsible, 65% responsible, which means the entire $5 million award has to be paid by the school, even though they found the offender 35% responsible.
And when you take into account, too, that Del Barton's facing another 38 pending abuse cases, capitulation and humility might be a better strategy for them versus what the stand they're taking right now. And something interesting came out of this trial, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but didn't TM go to Del Barton higher-ups and say what was happening?
He did, shortly after graduating from the school. And they did encourage him to leave for another elite boarding school because of his grades. But I think they knew that something had been going on, right? So they encouraged him to leave. He did write a letter to the abbot at the time, and the abbot kept the letter and admittedly destroyed it some 20 years later when he was leaving that position. And he said he wanted to protect TM, and of course he said it would certainly be bad for the reputation of the school. So that was acknowledged during the trial, along with, like I said, other allegations of abuse had come up. And most certainly it was quite incredible. During the trial, additionally, a gentleman testified during the time, I guess, when Tom had served alongside the other maintenance workers, that he didn't see anything untoward and never heard anything from Tom, regarding the abuse. However, it was later discovered that very gentleman had been, after graduating from Del Barton, he's 20 years younger than the abuser, he had himself lived with that abuser for 2 years and then off, and then on again for another 8 years, at his home. So this was a very good friend, a very close friend of Father Lot, who came to testify on Lot's behalf. But again, the jury saw through it all. And
unanimous verdict in TM's favor, and the jury did not buy what Del Barton was selling. But then further on, punitive damages, Del Barton escaped that, at least in this trial. Certainly worthy of watching in the trial still to come. We're talking about Mark Crawford, who is the director of the New Jersey offices of survivors of those abused by priests. He is also one of those survivors, snapnetwork.org in New Jersey /new_Jersey. And you are listening to Issues and Ideas. In this case with TM launched all the way back in 2017, which that alone gives you, I think, the true measurement of the effort it takes to get to this justice conclusion that we saw happen for TM. And this all came about because of the New Jersey Child Victims Act. Talk about what that has been, how that has enabled victims. I mean, that window is shut now, but in that time that it was in effect, it certainly did make a difference. Well,
it's even though the window for past abuses had passed in 2019, it was open for 2 years from that point, December of 2019. However, anybody who's abused to this day under the age of 55 or 7 years from the time they make the connection between the abuse and the damage or harm it's done to one person, they can still avail themselves now of the Child Victims Act and pursue civil remedy. It certainly has made a big difference because the former law was 2 years from the age of 20, and very few victims come forward at that early age. Very few. In fact, the average age victims come forward is 52, and that's if ever. So the law had to change. It did change. It took many years. I advocated for that change for almost 20 years, and Senator Joseph Vitale here in New Jersey championed that cause and helped it come to fruition for sure. So we are certainly grateful that the legislature saw fit to finally understand, the damage and long-term harm and the years it takes for victims to come forward and seek justice, whatever that might be for any individual, if they want to pursue that route. However, as you mentioned, it's been clear that these powerful institutions have dragged this on. That law changed 7 years ago, And this is the very first case under that law to come in dealing with a Catholic institution anyhow here in New Jersey. It is the first civil case that made it to trial. So you can see how the Catholic dioceses have been fighting tooth and nail to drag these victims on and on and on. And that's still the case. I mean, this is only one case that has made it to court. Then there's 39 more against Del Barton alone and hundreds concerning the other 5 Catholic dioceses here in New Jersey.
And there's a lot more, no pun intended, revelations to be coming in light of other, we don't have time to get into them all right now, but other court decisions and rulings that are taking place that, if you recall, and if you don't, you can find it over at our downloads page, the Pennsylvania report on church abuse, Catholic church abuse, and the significance that made. That is going to be cliff notes compared to what I think New Jersey is going to wind up creating and releasing.
That's correct.
And just to wrap up here, just to give you an idea of what the victims go through, this is what TM sought in the personal injury claims as a result of the sex abuse by the priest, or rape I call it, which is more accurate to what it is. Physical, emotional, psychiatric injuries, PTSD, depression, loss of Catholic faith, and the list goes on from there. But as Mark demonstrates and has for years, and with the new laws on the books and the greater awareness of who needs the protection, and it's not the institutions. The institutions in the aftermath worry more about, we don't know how we're going to stay open. That should be the least of your worries and the last of your worries right now. It's making things right for the victims that you allowed to be created through your lack of interest, lack of concern, lack of compassion, lack of every word of God that you say you've dedicated your life to live up to, and have obviously drastically failed in that promise. That's something you have to contend with, but you also need to contend with the victims that you allowed to be created. And if you are a victim, hopefully what you see unfolding now will encourage you and compel you to step forward and take the action that is justifiably yours. And to find out more about the path you could take in that direction, Snap Network is certainly the go-to for your support network and your support teams. SnapNetwork.org. If you're listening on the stream, there's chapters all across the country. And in New Jersey, new_Jersey, we do have the link at our homepage as well. Mark, we've talked about this for a lot of years, and it's so good to see the light gets brighter each and every time now we talk versus turn back the clock 5 years. And boy, it was dark back then, but you kept fighting, and the truth is always going to outlast anything else. So thanks for your work. Thanks for your advocacy. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Just want to see these victims have an opportunity for justice and healing.
One of the many day one promises made by Donald Trump was lower prescription drug prices as part of lowering the overall cost of health care in America. That's certainly a goal that's worthy of bipartisan support. So, if that is indeed a sincere goal, then why the tariffs on pharmaceuticals and medical equipment that's crucial for so many patients? With us now to examine why America imports so much of these healthcare necessities and how the tariffs will impact the cost of healthcare for patients, along with the supply chain for pharma companies and hospitals here in America, is the Senior Director for Government Affairs with the National Taxpayers Union, Thomas Aiello. How are you today, Thomas?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for addressing this confusing, I was going to say fluid issue, but the fluidity comes from the policies. The impact is a lot more concrete, apparently. NTU.org is the website for the National Taxpayers Union, and we have that link at our homepage as well. Catch us up. As we talk today, what is the status of tariffs on prescription drugs and medical equipment? Because it seems like almost every week it's a different either delay or resorting of order of exemptions, non-exemptions. So catch us up. What's the current status?
Yeah, you hit it perfectly. It is very confusing, and it's purposefully confusing. And unfortunately, it's American businesses and American patients and American consumers that are caught in the crosshairs of this whole thing. You know, one day we have a tariff of 100% on pharmaceuticals. The next day it's dropped down to 15%, depending on the country. So it just adds all this confusion into the marketplace. And it's so difficult for businesses that are looking to import affordable drugs to make them accessible to the people, to know what is going to happen. So in some cases, you're seeing companies import a whole bunch of goods to get ahead of some of these tariffs. In other cases, they're just eating the cost of it, not passing it along to consumers. And in many cases, they are passing it along. And of course, we're seeing this as it relates to pharmaceuticals. We're seeing it on other things like coffee and imported goods that we can't produce here in the United States. The president is right that we can and we should produce more drugs and other manufactured goods in the United States, but that takes time. We can't flip a switch and expect, all of these goods to come to market that are made in America. It just takes time. So we are really encouraging the administration to hit pause on the tariffs and find more constructive ways to produce more drugs, produce more medical equipment here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure we all agree we want more production in America, but the tariffs are impacting in a way that even hinders that, because the final pharmaceutical product it's almost like with the autos. It can be assembled here in America, but the parts have to come from other countries at this point in time, at least. Same thing with pharmaceuticals. China, for example, produces a lot of the materials needed for that final medication that the person in the hospital is going to receive.
It's such an interconnected supply chain that you're exactly right. There are different components made in different parts of the world. Some of them are assembled here, created here, and a finished product here. But in some cases, the Norwegian countries, the Scandinavian countries, they have such a strong innovation sector that they produce so many of these things, and then they're manufactured in other parts of the world. That's a good thing. We want more innovation. We want more cures to so many of these terrible diseases that impact so many people. But at the end of the day, if we do want to create more things in the United States, we have a 3-step plan on how to do it without tariffs. One, we can and should become energy dominant. The president is right that we need more American energy. We should tap into natural gas, crude oil, petroleum. For factories, one of their biggest input costs comes from electricity. The more energy we produce, the more affordable it will be to produce electricity to power these factories. 2, tax certainty, right? The president, he passed this major tax bill earlier this year. It avoids the largest tax increase on American producers in American history, and it includes so many good tax provisions that'll make it easier to build in the United States. 3, permitting reform. It takes years for factories to get approved by state and federal governments. We should cut the red tape and allow builders to build so American producers can produce. It's that simple. With those 3 things, we really can produce more things here at an affordable cost. But there's some things we just can't produce here, and that's okay. We should want foreign countries who produce things at a cheaper cost to send them here so Americans can actually benefit from those more affordable prices for these goods.
So Thomas Aiello, who is the Senior Director for Government Affairs with the National Taxpayers Union, NTU.org, their website, and you are listening to Issues and Ideas. Doing background for this segment, I was reading where the American Hospital Association had warned about supply issues going back to May. They saw the handwriting on the wall, so they recommended that medical facilities, hospitals, especially rural hospitals, which are existing on a bare bones financial foundation as it is, stock up as much as they could before the tariffs, which is all well and good. But then, well, again, turning to those rural hospitals, which are, again, highly endangered, when the supply runs out, so does their time. And what's that do for healthcare in America?
It only adds more fuel to this inflation situation that we're dealing with. There were new numbers out on Friday, which is today, that shows inflation isn't solved. Inflation is still up 3%. That's 50% higher than what the Federal Reserve wants to see. So there's still an affordability problem in the United States. And if you look even granular at the data that came out today, you'll see that medical services and medical commodities were all up month over month. That's a real problem. We think that coincides with this new investigation being opened up into 232 tariffs, new tariffs on, all these medical equipment that we've been talking about, things from your hospital gowns to your PPE, your masks and your gloves, to things like, syringes and tweezers, all things that hospitals use. That's going to add more pressure on hospitals to pay higher prices for these things if there are tariffs imposed on them. And then even for consumers, they want to put new tariffs on, stents, pacemakers, diabetes monitoring equipment. All of those things, if you put tariffs on them, you're not going to lower the cost of these prices. You're going to increase them. And Americans who are dealing with these chronic issues, they shouldn't have to worry about how they're going to have to pay for it or pay more for them. They should just worry about getting better. So at the end of the day, we really don't think that tariffs on medical equipment is the most appropriate solution at this time. We don't think that these things are actually going to help solve the problem. It's just going to make the situation worse and add more costs onto what American people already describe as a healthcare affordability crisis.
The ripple effect goes even further than that, though, Thomas, because you have the caregivers, which rely on more and more instances Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement. If costs are up, that reimbursement rate is probably going to drop down. And just the overall cost of health insurance, people are going to go without because the cost goes so high. But then in many states, New Jersey being one of them, you wind up paying a penalty if you don't have health insurance.
It's ridiculous. And you said it perfectly, the ripple effect. When the importers bring these products, these affordable products into the United States, they have to give it to the hospitals, and then the hospitals charge the insurance, and then the insurance charges the consumer. The end result is who pays. And ultimately, it's the consumer that will end up paying all of these different things. So yes, the hospital is going to be paying more for all these medical equipment and devices if there's tariffs, but they're not going to keep it. They're going to pass it along to the insurance, who's going to pass it along to the consumers. And no one wants to pay more for health insurance. I think that's a pretty universal thing. No one wants to pay more. We shouldn't have people paying more. We can produce more in the United States, but that takes time. We're not going to flip a switch and be able to produce all these things overnight. We need to give the system time to work itself out. And at that time, we'll have a system that is hopefully more efficient than what we have now.
Just to wrap up this segment, I'll leave you listening with this thought. Hopefully some good comes out of this. First and foremost, you're no longer buying the line that it's the exporting companies who pay the tariffs. I think that's become very crystal clear. If not, well, don't worry. It will be for you sooner versus later. Let's find out more about this issue. Other items related to finances, personal, national, federal, all points in between, policies and answers, as opposed to just others who just like to complain and do nothing. Well, the National Taxpayers Union has solutions. You can learn more, find out more at ntu.org. He is our Senior Director for Government Affairs, Thomas Aiello. Thomas, thanks for the insight today, for being here.
Thank you, and thank you to your listeners.
It's time once again for Trump Said It.
Mr. President, can you talk about your plans for the new ballroom that was announced today?
Yeah.
And the $200 million, that's going to be paid for by yourself as
By
well
me,
as
yeah.
private donations?
It's a private thing. Yeah, I'll do it, and we'll probably have some donors or whatever. But it's about $200 million. So we've been planning it for a long time. They've wanted a ballroom at the White House for more than 150 years, but there's never been a president that was good at ballrooms. I'm really good. In fact, I looked at one that we just built in Turnberry in Scotland, and it's incredible. We're good at building. I'm good at building things, and we'll get it built quickly and on time. It'll be beautiful, top of the line. We've retained the best architects and engineers, everything else. It'll be built over on the east side, and it will be beautiful. It'll be views of the Washington Monument. It won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of. It's my favorite place. I love it.
It has been said for quite some time now that America can't make things anymore. Cars, computers, phones, even furniture. Something else can be added to that list. Energy. Oh, we produce enough to get by, but domestic production hasn't been fully reached because of green energy ideas instead of being given priority. That decision has allowed countries like China to amass a huge energy arsenal, which is being weaponized against America in a variety of ways. When you think about that, my next guest joins us to discuss how the solution to this situation is actually within reach. He's an economist with the American Energy Institute and CEO of Petro Nerds, host of the Petro Nerds podcast. Trisha Curtis, how are you today, Trisha?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Great to have you here. PetroNerds.com, AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. We have those links for your reference at our homepage as well. And you recently wrote an article about how China is taking the lead. Winning against China means winning on energy. How did we wind up losing to China at this point in time?
Well, you introed that well, but it's complicated. So, this has been taking place over the course of 40 years with China, in this competition with China. But it's super important to realize that we are the largest oil and gas producer in the world. And we actually have the largest reserve of coal in the world as well. So we actually should not have a problem on energy. It is because of policies and not what's in the ground that's preventing us from doing that. So we produce 13.64 million barrels per day. That's almost 4 million barrels a day more than Saudi Arabia and Russia, the second largest producers. And we produce double the natural gas of Russia, the second largest producer of natural gas. So we have a lot of natural gas, 130 billion cubic feet per day. We have a lot of oil. But the problem is when it comes to electricity and the grid, that's where China has done a really, really good job in terms of just being very, very steady in building out their coal-fired power generation. And unlike the West and the rest of the world, where we've all gone crazy on green policies and decarbonization and carbon capitulation, China's just moved steadily forward because they're building things, and they have to do that with the energy that they have. And they are not abundant in oil and gas, but they are abundant in coal. And so since Mao, they've heavily leaned into coal, and they now have more power generation than any country in the world. They have a third of the world's power generation, but over half of that is coming from coal and coal alone, which means it's super energy secure and super reliable. And really importantly with coal, it's really dispatchable and it's really cheap.
And another way that's benefited China is the fact that they can refine rare earth minerals to the point where they are by far the dominant holder of those vital minerals for all things that modern life needs to function basically.
Absolutely. And that's a key point, and I put it in the article, but it's just important to realize is that China put these rare earth restrictions on, and if implemented, it will severely restrict all their exports of rare earths. And, it's not that these actual metals and minerals, are in the periodic table are that rare. We can mine them elsewhere, and we have them in the U.S. But that would mean that we have to start mining. Just like we got to mine for coal, we got to mine for these rare earths. But it's the processing. And processing, like refining, it's processing and refining. It requires energy. It's a very energy-dense, very heat-intensive process. And that's what China is very good at because China doesn't have the environmental regulations. They pull the Band-Aid off. They don't care. They just do this stuff. And refining rare earths, it's not just energy-intensive. It's environmentally intensive. You have to extract uranium. You have to extract thorium off of it. And you have to, you have to do a lot to it. It's a big industrial process. And so we don't do that in the U.S., and almost all of that is done exclusively in China. So it's important that they control the end product. It's that end product that, ends up in batteries from your iPhone, but also into electric vehicles. And, they control they basically produce all solar panels and most onshore wind turbines and most batteries and a huge portion of EVs as well.
It's fine. We make deals with nations like Australia, but that's not going to come to any fruition for at least a year. We made a deal with Ukraine, and that's way in the distance before anything can be realized from that. With the dominance of electrical generation and the need for electricity to operate data centers in our rapidly increasing world of artificial intelligence, doesn't that put China again ahead in a very vital element of world existence versus the United States?
So, this is kind of where it gets back, like on paper, yes, but this is where it gets back to sort of, how we won against the Soviet Union, formerly Russia in the Cold War. And we won because we had a superior economic dominance, right? And we were better, right? And our economic position was in a better situation, and we outsmarted them, and we made this work. We need to be doing that now. We have the energy. We shouldn't be being beat, but China's built it. And so we do need a lot of energy for artificial intelligence. We need a lot of energy just for anything, right? We need low-cost, reliable electricity for you and I to turn our lights on and for us to have this conversation and record it. But we need it for business. We need it for manufacturing. We need it to make automobiles, to make aluminum. You need that in peacetime, but you absolutely need that in wartime. And China has, when they have 10,000 terawatt hours of power generation, or one-third of power generation, they can do not just AI, but they can do everything. And so they built out this massive coal-fired power generation base, and now energy is an afterthought for them, not a beginning thought. And for us, it's this beginning thought where as we're building out data centers and AI, everybody's trying to figure out where they're getting the power from, and it's driving up electricity prices. And we already had this spike in electricity prices way before AI. So we have a big problem. And the bigger problem is that, we're thinking about artificial intelligence in a very, very different way than China. China is a controlled surveillance state, right? They're building DeepSeek and all their AI on open source stuff, but it's limited, right? You're not going to be able to Google Tiananmen Square or, say that Xi Jinping is Winnie the Pooh, and what does that mean? Like, none of that's going to pop up, right? It's going to be it's very controlled. They want AI for military and military deployment. We want AI for productivity and businesses and enhancing things and having businesses hire less people. And that's a very different thing. And I would say that's fundamentally the number one thing that differentiates the U.S. and China, that people have to really understand why this cheap coal really, really matters. And that's that we don't compete the same way that China does. China does not care about costs, and they don't care about profits, and they don't care about margins, which should tell you that their end goal is it's a lot different than ours. And their end goal is probably sitting more in the realm of conflict than it is in profitability.
Trisha Curtis, who is an economist with the American Energy Institute, CEO of Petro Nerds, host of the Petro Nerds podcast, petronerds.com, AmericanEnergyInstitute.com, and you're listening to Issues and Ideas. I know people use California as a benchmark of what's wrong with energy policy in the nation, but New Jersey should be part of the consideration too. We're seeing rate hikes. The candidates for governor promising day 1 days of declarations of emergency, which will do nothing to solve the problem. But we're a state where we are getting an increasing amount of our electricity through auction from other states. And if you've never been to an auction, you don't do bargain shopping on auctions too much. That explains why trying to fill the void versus find new production is what results in the higher prices.
Yeah, it's a big problem, especially in places like the Northeast and East Coast and West Coast have some of the highest electricity prices, not dissimilar to what we're actually seeing prices like in Germany for electricity prices that are 45 cents a kilowatt hour. You're seeing some prices as high as that on the East and West Coast. And that cripples your ability to turn the lights on and heat your homes, but also just to manufacture anything. So it really matters. But your point on you're buying this power, the problem we have right now is a lot of these states have these power purchase agreements where they really favor they favor the cheap upfront cost of wind and solar that's heavily subsidized by China because supposedly that it's green. And the problem is it's not green, but also it raises your electricity costs immediately when it gets into the grid. And so places in like New Jersey, places like New York, everywhere in the Northeast, you have you have the largest natural gas resource in the entire world in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania and a little bit in New York. All you have to do is build pipelines to get it and build, natural gas power generation. It's not super complicated, but this has been, for a couple decades, no one's wanted to build a pipeline in the Northeast, and no one wants to build anything. So there's a big problem going on in the Northeast and the West Coast for NIMBYism, that not in my backyard and not building anything, but it's not because we don't have the resource. And I say this to folks a lot. I was in Houston this week speaking at a conference. I was in Dallas last week. I say this to audiences and business leaders a lot, is that it's not that we don't have the energy. We have more natural gas than the world needs over. And we could solve this problem and we should have very, very cheap electricity prices, but we don't. And that's a regulatory problem. We can easily solve this and provide this energy. We have it right there. We have it in the Northeast.
Just to wrap up, would this be an easier answer to reach for and grab if the refineries, the mining industries, everyone who does the digging and the exploration made their dedication of doing it safely and doing it not to damage any precious part of the environment? Are they making their intention clear enough that would silence any of the objections that run up against what is, as you write in the article in the Daily Caller, a very reachable solution?
Yeah, I don't think it's that simple, because if you go to a coal mine, and I encourage people to do so, go. We have the largest surface coal mines in the world. Several of them are in Wyoming, outside of Gillette, Wyoming. Two of the largest surface coal mines, I think the third is in Indonesia, and the fourth and fifth are also outside of Gillette. Go to those coal mines. They are run extremely well because coal has been battered and beaten for decades, right? Everybody's wanted to get rid of coal. It's been heavily penalized. Everyone hates them, thinks it's akin to it is akin to smoking cigarettes. It's evil, and it's really not, right? It's a very energy secure rock that you dig out of the ground and you sit next to a power plant, and when you need it, you use it, which means it's super energy secure. And it's an energy dense rock, right? So it's the energy density that matters so much, but they do a really, really good job with this mining because we've largely had a moratorium on mining new coal mines in the U.S., and so they've really trimmed down their businesses. So I think we have a lot of lessons to learn from the coal mining industry that has barely survived, within the United States and has been beaten down for years. And now under the Trump administration, there are new policies to breathe new life to allow us to mine. But you have to have the economic environment to support it. But I just want to remind listeners that coal, the reason why it's so important, especially in this AI world with natural gas, is that it enables natural gas. Because natural gas is now half of our grid, but it can fluctuate in price. And coal is extremely cheap. So if you keep that coal-fired power generation and you stop decommissioning it, it can help backstop that when you have a price spike for natural gas. And no, it's not going to raise emissions considerably. And we do it very cleanly in the U.S. We have really, really high NOx and SOx and environmental requirements, very different than China has and the rest of the world has. And so we have the ability to do this. We just have to do it. But no, I think it's understanding that all of this stuff has to be mined. It's understanding that we have to build things in the U.S. We have to dig for things with a backhoe and a shovel that's powered by diesel. We have to, reduce this muscle atrophy that we've had for mining things, for digging things. And it's super important. And it can be done. I think we had problems like this in the early innings of World War II, where we were hesitant to do things, and then we realized we had to do them, and we did them. And so I think the U.S. has the resources and can do it, but we need to start doing this stuff now so we don't end up in a situation like we did in World War II.
Find out more about PetroNerds and the services that they offer and the podcast that Trisha hosts, petronerds.com. And to find out more about the American Energy Institute, AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. She is an economist with the aforementioned American Energy Institute, CEO of PetroNerds and host of the podcast PetroNerds, Trisha Curtis. Trisha, thank you for helping us better understand versus the hype and the political leverage others try to do to take people away from the facts and the reality. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
When you either start a business or get promoted into a management position where you work, you obviously want to succeed. To do that, you need to gain an understanding of your role and the expectations that come with it. In order to achieve all that, people turn to information sources like books, for example. They'll jump on to Amazon, maybe go into an actual bookshop, seek out books on business, management, leadership, things like that. Have you ever seen just how many books are already available, along with the ones that are released almost daily that talk about some aspect of the business world and career? You can quickly assemble a personal library of books on all aspects of business and careers that will either fill numerous bookcases or hard drives, or you can turn to one book which, if studied and adhered to, will lead you to a success which will bring with it respect. That book is the book of Proverbs, found in the Old Testament of the Bible. The introduction of Proverbs lets you know without question that what awaits you as you read on will bless you with the wisdom, the drive, and sense of fairness that you need. Reading from Proverbs chapter 1, starting with verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. To understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fools despise wisdom and instruction. One of the main themes in Proverbs, as it should be in life, is the path to and value of wisdom. This is established in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her proceeds just a side note, Proverbs refers to wisdom as female. Going back to verse 14, for her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Proverbs also warns us about how to get on the wrong side of not just all things with business, but all things with God. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. These 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 9 teaches us what our character needs to be in order to receive what we're taught and grow from it. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. In Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14, we're told about the value of effective leadership. Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Now in business, we are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. Now it's what you do during those times in the aftermath of a mistake. That's the vital time. Here's the guidance we find in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 1. Whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. How often do we hear stories about business leaders at all levels who wind up in court or in prison because they took shortcuts? Proverbs chapter 13, verse 4 places this truth in front of us. The soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. Of course, communication, that's one of the keys to success. Speak harshly, irrationally, and you'll find yourself alone quickly. Here's the instruction found in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. How about teamwork? Listening to others. Think back when he was the head of General Electric, Jack Welch made it very clear and well known to everyone in the corporation that if you had an idea, he wanted to hear it. He was embracing the lesson that we find in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 22. Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. If you're fair and just, the people that you work with or those who work for you will stand with you. Let's read from Proverbs chapter 18, verse 5. It is not good to show partiality to the wicked or to overthrow the righteous in judgment. Having a strategy and direction, that's certainly a requirement. That also includes ideas of what to do if challenges come about. That's the difference between patience and impatience, or as Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5 proclaims, the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty, surely to poverty. Now, there will come a time when you have a person who they're just not getting it and they're not fitting in with the team. Now, you know the person I'm talking about, the one who runs down the boss, runs down coworkers, that dark cloud, person that brings everyone else down. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 10 tells how to deal with that person. Cast out the scoffer, and contention will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease. Humility counts for a lot in a leader, too. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 27, verse 2. Let another man praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. Proverbs, as you can tell, is one of the books of the Bible that you can really flip open to any point and gain knowledge and wisdom. It's a great example of how a little taste will increase your hunger for more. Considering all that I've shared with you, and there's a lot more that you'll find in Proverbs, you have a choice to make. You can take on all these instructions on your own, hope for the best, or you could take the path which will, without any question, result in truly living these words instead of just reading them. Now, how do you find that path? Well, the answer is also found in Proverbs chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk uprightly. Be sure to check out our website, issuesandideasradio.com. You'll find more information about the guests who joined us here on the show today. Actually, the entire Issues and Ideas world can be launched into from the homepage. We have the Classic Conversations, the New York City Radio Museum, links to our podcast now on Apple and Spotify and iHeart, downloads, information, links, audio. You'll find it all at issuesandideasradio.com. Always thankful and grateful for your time and your attention. Very valuable and special to us. Look forward to being with you right here this time next week for our next edition of Issues and Ideas.